Welcome to another SEC baseball preview by Southern Sports Gumbo. We're going to be talking LSU baseball tonight. Little recap on their 2025 season. They went 53 and 15, 19 and 11 in the SEC. National champions. Jay Johnson heads into his fifth year as the head man at LSU, won two national championships in the last three seasons. This is his 13th year as a head coach, and he has won two national championships, been a runner up, and had another College World Series appearance for four trips to Omaha. Jay is truly elevating the game of college baseball. Diving into the upcoming season a little bit more, coming off a 982 fielding percentage in 2025, which set a program record, the Tigers will have a completely new look at backstop in the infield aside from shortstop Stephen Milam. Some of the key losses that the Tigers lose this season: first baseman Jared Jones hit 323 with 15 doubles, 22 home runs, and 76 RBIs last year. He's off to pro ball. Daniel Dickinson, second baseman who hit 315, 14 doubles, 12 home runs, and 49 RBIs, is also gone. Then Fry, primarily a DH, hit 331 with 15 doubles, 13 home runs, and 50 RBIs last year, is also gone. Starting catcher Luis Hernandez from a year ago and starting third baseman Michael Braswell have also moved on to professional baseball as well now. Pitcher. Um, and then some of the key losses for the Tigers on the mound starts with Cade Anderson, who had a 3.18 ERA, went 12 and 1 across 19 games, striking out 180 batters in 119 innings. Anthony Ianson, who went 12 and 2 in 18 starts with 108 innings and 52 punch outs, is also gone. And they lost closer and relief guy Chase Shores, who really came along as the season progressed and finished with 70 punch outs in 63 innings. So, with all that the Tigers lost, there are some bright spots with returners from last year. Outfielder Derek Curiel is going to move to center field this year after playing left as a freshman. He led the team with a 345 batting average, 20 doubles, two triples, seven home runs, and 55 RBIs. Jake Brown's also back in right field after hitting 320 with nine doubles, two triples, eight home runs, and 48 RBIs. Shortstop Stephen Milam's back. He had 295 last year with 14 doubles, 11 home runs, 57 RBIs, and walked 41 times to just 27 strikeouts. Chris Stanfield, last year's center fielder, moves to left field this year after hitting 298, was a touch over 300 in conference play, had 15 doubles and 31 RBIs. Do want to talk about Stanfield for a minute. Jay's mentioned it in interviews. Chris Stanfield was a guy who passed up, some undrafted free agent contracts to come back to LSU, and losing the center field spot, Derek Curiel. He knew coming in, I'm gonna play left field, right field, wherever you want me to play, coach. I'm gonna be the best player I can be at that position. Stand up guy, was the Tony Gwynn Community Service Award winner last season. And then you've got Cade Beatty, who slots into the everyday catcher role after starting 19 games last year, showed a little power with four home runs and 62 at bats. Then let's talk about the guys coming back from the mound. We mentioned Anderson and Ianson gone. Jackson Evans back though, after a dominant freshman season where he had a 2.05 ERA, went 5 and 1, and had 71 punch outs in 52 and 2/3 innings. Then you get to relief guys out of the bullpen, midweek starters, guys back from injury. You've got Zach Cowan, Cooper Williams, William Schmidt, Jade Newt, Maverick Rizzi, and Gavin Guidry, who are all back. Guidry was out last year, but through his first two seasons, pitched 53 innings, striking out 78 batters. And the first five names I mentioned were guys who accounted for 161 and two-thirds innings with 195 punchouts. So while the Tigers lose a phenomenal 1-2 punch from last year, they still return over 200 innings pitched and over 275 punchouts from last year. Now, some of the key additions the Tigers brought in, they added 10 bats to the roster between the portal and high school ranks, headlined by first baseman Zach York, who transferred in from Grand Canyon after a 339 season with 10 doubles, 13 home runs, 46 RBIs, and 35 walks to just 28 strikeouts. Frank Caraway's another guy LSU added at third base, played at Oregon State last year, hit 267, but really came along in postseason play. Finished the year with 15 doubles, 12 home runs, and 47 RBIs. Braden Simpson, guy who will from high transfer from High Point, he'll factor in at second base and the DH spot. Three 389 last year with 24 doubles, 22 home runs, and 77 RBIs. Another guy who's going to factor in at second base and DH is Seth Dardar from Kansas State. He hit 326 last year with 18 doubles, 13 home runs, and 45 RBIs. A few other newcomers that are expected to have a role are going to be freshman catcher Omar Cerna and freshman Mason Braun, who both factor into the DH role as well as key backups for this lineup. And JUCO transfer Daniel Harden, he'll be a key backup in the outfield. Just like in the field, on the mound, the Tigers brought in 10 pitchers from the portal and high school ranks, headlined by Cooper Moore from Kansas, who projects to be LSU starter on Saturdays. After going 7-3 through 88 and two-thirds innings and punching out 85, freshman Marco Paz is going to be a key part of this staff. After an injury delayed his debut, opted out of the draft, he's going to get a lot of meaningful innings and might possibly even crack the weekend rotation at some point this year. Few other guys, left-handed pitcher Santi Garcia from Oregon, who was a teammate of Stephen Milam in high school. You've got Danny Lackmeyer, another left-handed pitcher from North Dakota State, and Ethan Pogg from JUCO, who are all going to factor in to the bullpen. And you've got freshmen Zion Theopolis and Reagan Ricken, who are going to be a part. And then you've got a phenomenal setup guy in Dax Date, who's going to be a guy who can go in and get an out or two when needed. So that's a little breakdown of what LSU brought in, what they lost, what they retained. We'll go to projected lineup, schedule, breakout players in a moment. Kevin, any thoughts on, what the Tigers brought in this year?
Yeah, so last year losing Bear Jones, big bat, hit 20 plus home runs, and then Ethan Fry, who really came on. Those guys, along with Carriel, kind of led the team hitting wise. And then last year's team really evolved outside of those guys into uh, the Ianson and Anderson 1-2 punch and a great defensive team. Now Dickinson was really good at the plate early, but once he had the hand injury, he kind of regressed at the plate, and he was great defensively. That's why I bring him up. And then you transition that to this year's team, still going to be solid defensively. Milam, you hear great things about Aaron Beatty. Curiel is going to be good in center field. Callaway is going to be a good defensive player at third. Stanfield will be outstanding at defense in the left field, just moving over from center. And Jake Brown, you know, really a good athlete. great arm out there. At one time, they looked at him as potential coming in and pitching in relief. So he's got plenty of arm and right. So still plenty of good defense. But second base, they're not going to replace the defense that Dickinson had. And first base, Bear Jones, people can talk about him different ways, but he was one of the best fielders in the SEC at first base last year. So I think you're going to see a little step back on that side of the infield uh, defensively on the right side. I still think they'll be solid defensively. I think an interesting thing is about this team is their bats are going to be deeper. You may not have a 21 home run or a 20 plus home run guy, but you may have, five, six guys that hit 12, a couple guys hit 15. So I think you'll hit as many home runs as last year, better batting average. You're going to score more runs, and you're going to have just a better overall batting average and how they score, which I think you'll lead to more bigger innings. I know that's kind of backwards when you talk about the power. A home run can put three on the board, but I just think the deeper lineup and the more guys that can hit 10 plus home runs definitely will be a better recipe for crooked numbers. When you look at the pitching staff, I mean, they're just loaded. Um, we talked about Texas and they have such a deep pitching staff. We talked about Florida and some really good arms. LSU's right there. Y- Texas has more proven pitching, but LSU has just as much from a ceiling standpoint or where they can go with this pitching staff. So, and I guess the one guy that I really want to watch in the staff, he may not start all year because they're so deep. You've got Evan Schmidt, Moore, potentially Williams to start. But I really want to see Paz. I really want to see him and what he brings pitching wise. And I think week one we'll see him either Monday or Wednesday. And but potential wise, he's got a big ceiling. And so I just would like to see him throw and see where he's going to end up in this. I think probably where you see him most of the year is coming in tight moments and, pitching well and hopefully executing. And one of the things that we've seen Jay do also that I think really fits this team, Jay likes to use a starter and then bring a guy that he looks at as a guy that comes right in after that starter, basically in a shutdown role that gives you 3 innings. So guys like Callan, that's what he did last year. Jaden Newt can fall into that role. And again, I think Paz might end up in that role too, from that standpoint. And if Cooper Williams doesn't start, he's another guy that could be in that role. And then if you get to that last inning and you just need 3 outs, is that where Gidry comes back in? So just loaded potential wise pitching and a lot of solid everyday players. So definitely a top five team. I'll let you kind of recap the lineup. I know I talked a little bit about them, but I'll let you kind of recap the lineup there and stuff. So go ahead with that aspect.
Yeah, piggyback on what you were saying, all the pitching talent, that's a testament to what Jay Johnson's doing. Because you're looking at losing three guys in Ianson, Anderson, and Chase Shores that combined to go 29-6 and struck out over 400 batters between the three of them. So to lose that kind of production and to still feel like you've got potentially the deepest room pitching staff in the country just speaks volumes of what Jay Johnson's been able to do. So going into the lineup here, you're going to have Kate Beatty at catcher, Zach York from Grand Canyon at first. I'm going to pencil Seth Dardar here in at second and Braden Simpson at DH, but I think those two are going to be very interchangeable. And you're going to have Tanner Reeves, the redshirt senior, competing for a lot of spots, as a lot of opportunity as well. Trent Caraway's going to be a great third baseman for the Tigers. Stephen Milam's back at shortstop. And then the outfield, you essentially have three center fielders playing in the outfield, and Chris Stanfield in left field, Derek Curiel in center, and Jake Brown in right. You talked about the power that this team has. I really see 8 out of the 9 spots hitting for double-digit home runs. Chris Stanfield's a guy who's not gonna provide a ton of power, but he's gonna be a 300 to 315 hitter, probably hit 15 to 20 doubles. So there's really not a weakness in this lineup. Ton of left-handed bats as well. Then you go over to the pitching staff. Right now I've got Kason Evans as your Friday guy coming off a really strong freshman year. Cooper Moore, the transfer from Kansas, as your Saturday guy, and William Schmidt penciled in as the Sunday guy, which there's still plenty of people competing for starts here that I'll talk about in a moment. But William Schmidt, he came in with a ton of hype, and I think people kind of overlook. He still had a very solid season. Went 7-0 with a 4.7 ERA, struck out 41 in 32 innings. He did struggle with walks and command at times last year, but if you look at how he bounced back in his most recent scrimmage, he's ready to go. Here's where, I could throw Jaden Newt, Zach Cowan, Cooper Williams, even a Gavin Guidry in as the fourth starter. I'm throwing Marco Paz in here. That's how much belief I have in what he's going to be able to do. But LSU's got 6 or 7 guys who could go out and compete and start on the weekends. Maverick Rizzi's a key piece that's back too. Probably going to play a closer type role, which we'll see how that really translates. I already talked about Zach Cowan, Cooper Williams, and Jaden Newt a little bit. They're all going to be key bullpen guys, as is Gavin Guidry, who's coming back. And then one returner that I want to talk about. Eddie Yaman's a guy who in spring he's played first base, catcher, a little bit of outfield. He's a right-handed bat, and on a team that outweighs has more left-handed bats than right-handed bats, he's a guy who, if his bat's working, he's going to have moments to compete, whether that's at catcher, at first base in a DH role. So really excited to see what all these guys can do because they're 2 or 3 deep at every position this year. Any thoughts on the lineup?
No, I think you nailed it pretty good. Like we were talking, and I agree with Dardar, and I I think Simpson may start at second. Dardar may be the DH, but like you said, it's interchangeable. But I think Dardar plays a big role on this team because of his bat and because he can play second, third, first, and just giving guys days off here and there. He'll play as much as anybody through the multiple positions, and having that versatility is important. Again, I like Paz, like you mentioned, love their staff. Caraway, want to see what he does. He had a better freshman year than his sophomore year, but again, I think he's solid defensively. Again, I think it's a really good team. They're preseason top five. We when we did the Texas preview, we talked about how it would be a really fun series to see Texas and LSU play in the national championship series, 2 out of 3, and I think it would be. And the great thing about, an SEC play, these 2 teams could meet in the SEC tournament, and things like that, and, we could see them actually play before going to Omaha, and we're certainly gonna see them play other teams and how they fare with other teams and a little bit of comparison, through that. So, it's a top 5 team. You referenced Jay and how well he's done. And I think the last thing I'll kind of say about Jay and LSU is he's a guy that he does a lot of experimenting through the season. And sometimes in life, your best strength can also be your best weakness. But I give him credit for how he finally gets it the way he wants it by the time you get to Omaha and that piece. And he's really kind of learned the dynamics of how to have a team best at the end of the season. And there is an act to that. But there was no doubt. in this team last year when they got to Omaha that they were going to make a run at it, and you saw the team play confidently uh, and beat a good Arkansas team twice, and and then was able to beat Coastal 2 games in a row. But just the level of confidence that they played once they got there, and I think you'll continue to see that with the team this year. He really blends them well. And look, that team last year had a lot of new guys and a lot of transfer guys too. So that same mix, he's proven that he can put that together and mix the egos, mix the different players that have not maybe played 2 or 3 years together. He does a lot of things to bring a team together and build that team chemistry. Um, he's totally committed to what he does. So you got to give him credit there. So I think the last 3 or 4 years, you could have taken a look at him and Vitello, and one guy said Vitello the best, another guy might say Jay's the best. Well, Vitello's not in college baseball anymore, so I think that certainly leaves it for Jay. This team's got a chance to compete for a national championship, and if they were to win it, winning 3 out of 4, man, that would really set it up for a heck of a career at LSU for Jay. He definitely seems like he's in it for the long haul, and he's definitely winning for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So my breakout players of the year for LSU this year, I'm gonna start with a bullpen arm, Jaden Newt. Coming out of high school, he was the number one right-handed pitcher in the state of California, drafted in the 19th round, decided to come to college, ended up having Tommy John, and took some time to rehab from that, but was solid last year. From April 29th to June 18th, he had 7 appearances, recorded 22 strikeouts through his final 14 and one third innings, and I expect him to take another big step. He's got a splitter that is almost unhittable. So really love everything about Jaden Newt. Second breakout player is going to be Trent Caraway, the transfer from Oregon State, who came into Baton Rouge a lot more advanced from a defensive standpoint than I think the staff thought. Going to be a big part of this lineup. And, he struggled at times last year, but when they got to postseason play for Oregon State, he was playing the best baseball of his life at that point. So I think he's going to be able to carry on from where he finished last year and take another step forward. Last breakout player of this year for me, I've got William Schmidt here. As a true freshman, appeared in 17 games with 6 starts, going 7-0. I talked about striking out 41 and 32 and a thirds innings. Control was an issue at times last year and in the fall, but if the last scrimmage that he pitched in is any indication of what he can do after striking out 9 or 10 guys in a row, he is poised for a breakout year this year. And then with LSU's schedule, they've got a couple games early in the season against Northeastern. They're a team that has an All-American outfielder in Harrison Feinberg and an RPI of 23. So it's a really quality matchup. LSU also faces Indiana, Notre Dame, and UCF in Jacksonville, and then midweek games against Southeastern, Creighton, McNeese, and a road midweek game against UL are all quality quad 2 games. Then you get to the SEC schedule. They do miss Arkansas, Auburn, and Texas, along with Alabama and Missouri. They're going to travel to Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Mississippi State, Georgia, and Ole Miss, and then they get to host Oklahoma, Kentucky, Texas A&M, South Carolina, and Florida. There are a few challenges in here. Don't want to dismiss that. But overall, I think the Tigers drew a pretty average to favorable schedule. I look at the home series. There's no reason they can't win all of them. And then I really like, even though Tennessee is my least favorite place from a travel to a baseball game, with our power hitting, I like our chances at Tennessee and at Georgia to make their advantage, which is normally a small ballpark, make it our advantage on the road. Any thoughts on the schedule? And then I'll wrap up after this with my predictions and kind of final thoughts on the season.
Yeah, I think it's a fun schedule. And for like where I'm at, we're an hour and 40 minutes from Georgia. So when they play there, we always go over and watch one or two games. So we will. To your point, Tennessee might be a fun series to go to this year. That's not far away. I think it's going to be fun to see them play those teams and match up. Again, Jay's won two of the last three College World Series, but he's not won the SEC. He kind of uses the SEC competition to build the team, get them battle tested, to go through some stuff and to experiment and get the best lineup. He's been a master at that, and I think we'll again see that again this year. And again, to me, I don't look at it because he's proven you don't have to. I don't look at this LSU team and say I want them to win the SEC. I look at these SEC matchups with how he coaches them as these are just let's look at this. They're going to be fun series. Let's go in, win as many as we can, watch the team develop, and really look at the season starts for Jay. The meat of the season starts for Jay really after the SEC tournament. So certainly you got to play well enough to get a high seed, and I think they will. I think they'll be a top 4 or 5 seed in the NCAA baseball tournament. You know, a lot of half the polls have them preseason number one, half have UCLA. So they're certainly going to be up there. I like their schedule because it gives you a lot of fun games to look forward to. I guess is where I'm going with it, and to see how they progress. Give us your breakdown on how it's going to roll.
Yeah, my final thoughts here. Jay Johnson, 2 national championships in the last 3 years, did a phenomenal job filling positions of need from last year's team. Defensively, I think this team's gonna take a slight step back, but I don't think anything that's gonna impact their ability to field a baseball by any means. Coming off the best defensive performance in program history, your chances are you're going to take a step back. But I think, the Tigers add so much more to the plate this year. We talked about it earlier. I think you have 8 guys who hit double digit home runs with so much depth everywhere. And talking about the mound, that 1-2 punch that went off to pro ball was the best 1-2 punch in college baseball last year. But I really think guys are going to step up, and I love the depth of not only the starters, but the bullpen on this year's staff. I can see the Tigers going, 22-8 with almost a floor of probably 19-11 this year with how everything lays out, which will lead to another top 8 national seed. LSU is one of the best teams in college baseball again this year and should be back in Omaha competing for a championship just 1 year after winning it all. So, can the Tigers win 3 out of 4? I think is the question fans are asking. And I hate even mentioning the Tigers going back to Omaha this early. I don't like using the word as much as some, but this is a really talented Tiger team. More depth than they've had in a really long time, and this team is going to be a team that everybody else in the SEC, not only because they won last year, circles them, but because of the talent they have on this team, they're going to be on everybody's list to go after. And I've got faith in Jay Johnson and the rest of the staff. You know, imagine, Nate Yeskie, one of the best pitching coaches in all of college baseball. You look at Josh Jordan is turning down head coaching ACC jobs to stay here. That's when I'm going to reference Lane Kiffin. It's different here at LSU. There's, no place like LSU for baseball specifically. So, the sky's the limit for this team, and with the coaching staff that LSU has, the roster they assembled, I don't know. I don't think this team falls very short of the sky this year.
Totally agree. And the points you made about LSU baseball, the tradition, you're 100% right. There's no school, Mississippi State is close and they would like to think they're right there with LSU, but there's no school in the current baseball climate that matches LSU, the fan support, how the fans travel with them, how they tailgate. They tailgate for a baseball game like a football game. And there truly isn't. There's not a team that travels as well as LSU in college baseball. The series in the College World Series last year, 80% of the fans in that end of that was LSU fans. Now, Coastal doesn't bring a lot, but still, when you get that many, and that many travel to road games, so you're 100% right. There is no place like LSU baseball, and especially when you pair that with a guy like Jay, that's going to bring the winning with it too. I mean, it certainly sets it up. It is totally different.
Yeah, we've got, one guy in particular to thank for all of that, Coach Skip Bertman.
Yes.
You know, I don't even know if he could have imagined what he was building at LSU. I mean, 5 championships. I know he had an inkling of what he was building, but it has become, the biggest monster in college baseball, and it's all thanks to him. Imagine if he decided not to leave Miami back in the mid '80s. Where would we be now? Probably not talking this highly about this LSU baseball team. So he laid the foundation, and coaches over the years have continued to grow that, and Jay Johnson just really takes it to new heights here. So excited to see what the Tigers can do this year.
Let me say one more thing. You mentioned Skip. Had the great run in the '90s with 5 championships, but he went to the College World Series in the '80s with some really good teams. And sometimes teams will do that. They it's the breakthrough. You get the breakthrough and you win one, and then you win another one, and that's kind of where Jay's at. I can remember when I was young and I had a conversation with my coach about I thought we could win the conference. Um, and the team that we would have had to beat for the conference, we ended up second, they ended up first. So he was right, I was wrong. They had more tradition, and I got into a discussion with him about tradition doesn't matter. We're better. We're going to beat them. Tradition doesn't matter. And he basically told me, no, tradition does matter because when you're playing a team with tradition, you're not just playing the other team. You're playing that confidence that they have because they've been there, and you're in the back of your mind. You're thinking we've got to beat them. And he was 100% right. And that's where LSU baseball is. That tradition, LSU goes on the field in the College World Series fully expecting to win. Other teams are happy to get there. They may play a little tight. That's not what LSU is. They've won 7, since Skip had his run. Well, I guess 8 now. Yes, 8. This will be 9 if Jay can get it this year. USC's got 12. But when you look at the modern day versus when USC did it, it's definitely LSU's the strongest in baseball. But tradition matters. I learned my lesson at a young age that I lost that argument. Tradition absolutely matters. And if you're playing LSU in May and June in the College World Series or the playoffs, you're not just playing the other team. You've got to beat that tradition, and that makes it very tough.
Yeah, and you look, I think going back to 1986, if you were a freshman at LSU, I think there's only been 2 classes in 86 in 40 years if you stayed from freshman to senior year that you did not go to Omaha. And that mixes in the COVID season in there. Yeah, you're talking, at least every 4 years, this team's in Omaha. About I think it comes out to like every 2.5 seasons, LSU's there. So, the tradition is unmatched. Just a great place to be to watch good college baseball year in, year out, at LSU.
Absolutely.
Well, that's a wrap on LSU baseball tonight. This is preview number 12. We'll be posting four more leading up to Friday's games. So remember to like, follow, subscribe, tell friends and family about us, and we'll keep bringing you guys some awesome baseball content.